Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers-Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers-Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, it's Jennifer Rogers-Markwell. You're joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. Today, I'm joined by Ivy Cirillo. I'll have you jump in and introduce yourself and explain because there's so many things.
Yes. So I am a best-selling author, an international speaker, an online business strategist, a digital nomad. I'm the founder of Perfectly Ambitious, a community serving multi-passionate, neurodivergent female entrepreneurs, turning their passions to profit with ease.
So all the things, right? Like,
Yes.
lots going on there. Give me a nice Reader's Digest version of what you do, how you do it, and why you do it.
Yes. So I have done almost every single job. I ran an IT company. I ran a marketing agency. I've been promoted in most of my positions within the first 2 months of being there. And I even worked on race cars at one point. So I've done a lot of things. And ultimately, I've realized that since doing client work, a lot of my clients are neurodivergent, female, multi-passionate creatives and entrepreneurs. And so now I help them take all of their grand ideas and go from ideation to automation once they've created the thing, launched the thing, and then basically turn it into passive income.
So for folks that don't have any concept of maybe defining wise of what you just said, can you break it down a little bit more for folks that are like, what?
Yes. So in particular, I help neurodivergence, aka anyone that is not neurotypical, potentially have ADHD, autism, anything like that. And basically, we are told that we are too ambitious. We want to do too many things. We need to niche down. And I help them take all of their ideas, turn it into something cohesive, tangible, something that they can actually take action on. And then I walk them through the entire process of creating that thing, that product, that business, that course. And then going through navigating, creating the actual item, launching it, and then doing everything on their end to make their life easier on the back end, whether it's creating like email templates or setting up the automations between their tech stack, and then just making it so basically that they can just make a profit off their passions while not having to put in too much time or energy on the daily.
How big is that demographic? Because I would imagine a lot of people potentially would fall into that, right? I mean,
Yes.
You and I were talking a little earlier about how, you're not just wearing one hat. You're wearing many, many different hats. And I think a lot of people can fit into that. And then there's also the folks that don't, that are like, why aren't you doing just one thing? And that's the one thing you should be doing. And that's it. How big is this audience that you have? Simply because I feel like a lot of folks would lean into that.
Mhm. So it's actually quite large. I know that I scale mine down to choose to work with female entrepreneurs. I personally think that they understand where I'm coming from as both a woman, but also they understand the concepts that I try to discuss and teach them. So while it is a little bit niche down and niche down a little bit again, because I work with neurodivergence, a lot of the stuff that I talk about within my business can work for neurotypicals too. So, and honestly, can work with males. Just I've noticed that a lot of what I teach, while can work for everyone, it's mostly going to be geared towards the people that sometimes are low energy. I personally have 22 chronic illnesses. And so sometimes that means that I can't hop on 6 calls in a day and I can't do everything in that moment. Sometimes I just need to sit at home with a book and a cozy blanket and like a heating pad. So I need to make sure that my business can continue working around me when I'm in those moments. And so it is while niche down, it is a huge demographic because a lot of people have those moments too. They want to make sure that they can spend time with their families while their business is running on its own. And so a lot of these low energy marketing strategies and a lot of the things working for neurodivergent people, it still applies to everyone because while I teach, um, for instance, my courses alone, I make sure that there's a video element, an audio element, and a hands-on element because we all learn differently. And then I make sure that everything's bite-sized, digestible. It's not going to hurt your eyes when you're looking at it. And while that all applies to my target audience, ultimately that works for everyone.
Yeah. And while you're doing this from all the different locations, right? You don't have necessarily a home base. We discussed where you're at currently, but where you're at currently could be changing whenever, right? Depending on what's going on. Tell us more about the digital nomadism that you're experiencing.
Yes. So funny enough, where I am currently located will change in 25 days because that is when I will head somewhere new. But yeah, I pretty much work anywhere that I have internet. Digital nomad life is not for everyone. It's not everyone's end goal. And so I started the digital nomad life back in 2021. I spent 4 months while I was working as a director of marketing for a marketing agency. And ultimately, I went through 28 states, hiked through all of them. Lived in my car for those 4 months. I had an amazing setup, actually more comfortable than the bed I'm sleeping on right now. And I worked from a lot of Paneras, a lot of McDonald's parking lots. And a lot of my clients would hop into our Zoom meetings, and I would even see some of them in person when I was traveling through the country. And a lot of them were just like, "Is your front seat your office?" And I was like, "Today, yes, it is. You need me in an instant? Like, I might Zoom you from the beach, but I will be there. Or at the top of Cathedral Rock in Sedona, I will answer your call if I have signal."
Obviously, that's a dedication right there, right? How did you end up leaning into that?
So I have not always been a traveler, but I've always moved. I had a pretty toxic childhood home life, which resulted in me going to college the first moment that I had the opportunity to. Since college, I think I have moved 20 times in the last, I'd say 10 years. I'm about to hit my 10-year high school reunion. And so I ultimately just never found that place that felt like home. I've lived in, I'd say 5 or 6 states by now. And I just thought, okay, maybe if I just hit the road, I'll fall in love with some place and I'll just be like, yep, this is where I'm at now. This is where I'm staying. And I just haven't found that yet.
You touched on childhood, and if you're open to sharing, we talked briefly before about money memories, and everybody's so different, and stories are so different and unique, and you have some very unique stories as well, if you're open to sharing.
Yeah, of course. So with my childhood, that's something that I also kind of exposed in my first book. I went through when I was younger, my mom was in an abusive relationship with my father. When she decided to leave, he saw a really bad future for us. So he thought if he ended our lives, then we wouldn't have to live that future. And so we would be better off. Ultimately, I survived, as did my brother, and did he. He went to jail, but I was put in care of my mother. And it wasn't a great childhood, not nearly as bad as my biological father expected it to be, but still not great. I was kind of the caretaker for both my parents and my brother, as well as my cousins. They had their own traumas that they dealt with, so they weren't exactly in a place or mental capacity to take care of us. So I stepped into that mother role pretty early on as a child. And that resulted in me making sure that if I needed to take money from my parents' change jar in order to pay for my school lunch or my brother's, or when I got into high school, I ended up working 3 jobs to pay my parents' mortgage because I realized that some of the bills weren't getting paid. So they used to kind of use me as a bank, use me as a loan. And then when I realized that some of the bills still weren't getting paid, even though I was giving them all of my money, they ultimately kicked me out.
Oh
And
gosh.
so that is kind of what led to me just being all over the place, traveling as much as I could, more for security and safety, and really just to get by rather than like me just being like, oh yeah, I want to go somewhere new. I want to see something pretty. Um, and so I had to deal with a lot of that. Ultimately, in college, I married my high school sweetheart. Um, it didn't last. I realized that while I did love him, we weren't a good fit. And we kind of married out of, at least for me, financial security. For him, he thought that's just like where you go next in relationships. So that's what we did. And so I had to kind of overcome a lot of financial stuff when I was younger. And then I was wheelchair bound and housebound when I decided to leave my husband. And ultimately, again, had to go get 3 jobs, work 7 days a week, 7:30 in the morning to 11 at night, until I
Wow.
kind of made my break into the corporate world and what I applied for was the social media manager position of an IT company, but I actually was offered the marketing, and operations coordinator position after that interview.
So you're doing it all.
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, quite a journey that you've had. How, from your lessons that you've had in your childhood and what you've experienced, how do you find your relationship is now, not only with yourself, but with yourself and money?
Um, with myself, it's getting better. I didn't love myself for a very long time, and a lot of that did stem from trauma. Um, because I was raised to believe that when my biological father tried to end my life, that it was out of me not being worthy, not being good enough, him not wanting me, and not because he, in his wrong mind, thought he was doing what was best. Um, that paired with the bullying of everything that I went through when I was younger, it took a lot to get to the place that I'm currently in now. And I actually learned a lot of my self love during my first 4 months of digital nomad life. Um, but my relationship with money, I would like to say, is slightly better. Um, but at the same time, because I'm neurodivergent, and super self aware, I recognize that sometimes I self harm with money. Um, whether that's if I'm on a trip and I know that I have money in the bank, but I'm not actually paying attention and I might overdraft because I'm scared to look at it and just to like assess where I'm at. Um, Even though it's as easy as just moving things from my savings into my checking, sometimes mentally I don't want to look. Um, but currently, I think I'm in a better place financially because I am attempting to create better habits and to stop financially self-harming.
That brings up a good point too. So when we talk about money infidelities, that falls kind of with under that umbrella to a certain extent, right? It's not
Mhm.
always an infidelity to someone else. It could be just, that lack of being maybe impeccable to yourself when it comes to finances.
Yeah,
And that's a thing. I feel like there's a lot of people that go into that route and aren't impeccable to themselves.
absolutely. In my kind of world of neurodivergent entrepreneurship, there is a terminology called ADHD tax. And sometimes that is where entrepreneurs or individuals, they will, when things are out of sight, they're out of mind, bank accounts included. Sometimes if you get pulled over and you have a ticket and you're like, oh yeah, I'll totally deal with that, but you're not home, so you can't pay it in that moment. Um, that ticket might sit there for a year and then you've got late fees and then you didn't show up for the court date and then you're in trouble. Or
Yeah.
you 1 year bought a whole annual subscription to something you needed for your business and you didn't mark it on your calendar the next time that would come out. And sometimes you have hurt yourself because you weren't planning for that expense and it came out and maybe you're in the negative. Um, so sometimes there's a lot of those moments, especially with neurodivergent entrepreneurs, that we would like to be better at. And sometimes we're just not.
What tips and tricks are you utilizing to, save money in your household, or things that you could share, that are working for you that could work for others?
Yeah. Um, so one of the things is when you do make purchases that are going to be automatic, I try to always recommend that you're going to put in your calendar. Same, if you are doing a free trial, sometimes we don't cancel those.
Those sometimes aren't free. Those sometimes are not free, right?
Yeah. So I always recommend like utilizing a calendar of some sort. I would love to believe that I can use a planner, but I absolutely can't. So I've got the calendar on my phone that is connected to every single one of my emails, and I try to make sure that I am utilizing that. I try to make the conscious decision, at least for me. Digital nomad life has really helped me become a minimalist in sorts, and also just my history with moving so frequently. I make the conscious decision of, do I want to pay to move this in the future? And if it's not worth it, I'm not buying it because it's just going to take up space for no reason. And therefore, I could use that money on something that I enjoy more, like food or a concert or a state park pass, something like that.
That's a great way of looking at things. And I agree with you, not only on that, but like the calendar, right? In my world, I have so much going on, which many of us do. But if it's not on my calendar, then it doesn't happen in my world, right? Truly. Like if it's not on there and scheduled, like what? It's not on there, right? So it doesn't happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes we even need to just mark on our calendar to look at those things. Like just even have a notice on the calendar that's not for anything in particular other than like, hey, just take a look at something. Even an entrepreneur friend that I have right now, we were talking about it yesterday. He had to give a refund to somebody for his client because one of his funnels, they actually stopped offering one of their services, but all of their funnels linked to that service and somebody paid for it. And sometimes we just need to set up to save ourselves financially in the future, just have a spreadsheet with all that stuff figured out and then just have on your calendar once a month to just double check them and make sure you don't have to give people refunds in the future.
I think having a note somewhere for everything that you're doing just to be able to double check on is definitely a nice safety net to have, behind the scenes for sure.
Absolutely.
You had mentioned your book. Tell us more about your book, the name of it, where you can find it if people want to find out more.
Yes. So my first collection is Unveiled, a poetry memoir, where I talk about my story, my pain, and my future, or what I hope for it. That is a poetry collection, about 200 pages, takes less than a couple hours to read. It's on all major retailers online, Amazon, Walmart, everything like that. And I do have signed copies on my website as well. And my second collection is set to release in March of 2023.
Thank you so much for sharing. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you
course.
for all of you that are spending some time with us today. And please join us on our next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.